Hey everyone, Dave from BCBushcraft, and welcome to a BushTalk episode. Today I'm going to be talking about the fear of camping alone. I am out right now exploring the woods. It's been kind of wet and a little bit stormy, so I haven't bothered to film this one, so I decided to set my tarp up, maybe shoot a few BushTalk episodes, maybe a knife review today, but that's about it. I'm going to be addressing a question that a subscriber brought up to me for this episode. And it revolves around the fear of camping alone. And he specifically is afraid to camp alone in British Columbia, mostly due to the wildlife of BC, so things like bears and cougars. This Bush Talk episode, I'm going to be trying to address how I managed to overcome some of my mental blocks and some of my fears, and the ways that you can camp smart so you don't have to encounter a wild animal unnecessarily. And we're going to just go through a few things. And basically, I'll just talk through my experience and how I work through some of the barriers that camping alone in the woods can pose for you guys. So the first thing is that when you're camping alone, it's definitely if you've never done anything like that before, it's a very unique experience, and it can be nerve-wracking, especially when it's at nighttime and there's no other light, maybe besides your campfire. The sounds of the forest all of a sudden get louder, even though they don't really. Twigs snapping, things falling, they all seem that, there could be a bear or a cougar stalking you at any moment. So there's definitely a lot of things that can psych you out in a sense when you're out in the woods doing wild camp or things like that. You do have to realize though that the odds of you kind of getting into trouble with a wild animal is incredibly small. And I tell myself this when I'm in the woods and say I get a little nervous. I take a bigger risk driving my car to the woods than I do like entering the woods by myself. I'm more likely to get in like a car accident, realistically, than I am to get attacked by a bear or get lost in the woods and things like that, as long as I do things safe and smart. There's things that you have to, take steps so when you're camping alone that the risk is greatly reduced. There will always be a risk camping alone, especially overnight. There's always a risk for things to go wrong. There's always a risk of wild animals attacking you because they're wild animals. So some things to bear in mind and some things that you can do to eliminate some of those risks. So let's run through a scenario of you're scared to do an overnight, but you really enjoy bushcraft and you want to do an overnight, say in British Columbia. The way that I started first doing overnights is, one, I didn't do them alone right away. Two, I never camped far from my truck when I was first starting out. Three, I camped in places that had cell phone service. So, things are a phone call away if necessary. Where I am right now, there's no cell phone service. Like the majority of my overnights on YouTube, I don't have cell phone service in those areas. Those are quite wild, actually. So, and I've had to hike away from my truck. So, but when I first started doing things, I started slowly. If I did get scared, I could always jump in my truck. You can do an overnight where you camp 10 feet from your truck. Practice just being alone in the woods, but you don't have to make it scary, right? So if you do get scared, you can always hop in there for a bit, or sleep a couple hours in your truck. So you can kind of ease your way into feeling more comfortable in the woods and realize that the rate of encountering wild animals is incredibly low depending on where you are. I find that you're more likely to encounter wild animals when you're kind of closer to civilization than the further away that you get to civilization, especially with black bears and stuff, because they like to go for easy food, things like fruit trees and garbage. And so they're more likely to be around campsites almost because there's easy food for them there than they are in the middle of the woods. When rivers are full of salmon, you're more likely to encounter black bears and stuff like that. So taking those sort of things into consideration too, if you do want to reduce, encountering a wild animal, it's almost better to go where the people won't be, because the food is a little bit harder for them sometimes. Not all the time, but it's just, you know, a general rule of thumb is that they do tend to be on the border of wilderness and where humans are, because they can get in, you know, to easy food for them. So that's one thing. Almost certainly you will have some sort of fear or being scared when you do your first overnight. I know that I definitely did, and it took a few of them for me to feel kind of comfortable at nighttime. I found that sleeping by a fire helped me mentally, that, you know, when I had the fire going all night, that it was comforting and, you know, provides warmth and things like that. When, you know, doing a hammock camp overnight where you're not like sleeping by the fire and you're sleeping in your hammock, I found that a little bit more nerve-wracking in the middle of the night, because there's no ambient light. You can't see anything unless you turn your flashlight on, and you're kind of like cocooned in your little hammock. I found that a little bit more nerve-wracking than sleeping by a fire. So, you know, things like that, if you're first time for doing something like that, I would suggest sleeping by a fire at nighttime too. That might help you to go to bed, and then, you know, you can stoke the fire in the middle of the night if you get scared. I know that one of my first times I definitely did that, and I didn't prepare enough firewood, so I was scrambling around at nighttime trying to stoke my fire with any firewood that I could find. But you learn through those experiences and things like that, and eventually you'll be comfortable enough where it doesn't really matter whether the fire is going or not. You can fall asleep. So those are some of the ways that you can kind of reduce your own, like, psyching yourself out, is by taking some of those steps. I always suggest, you know, whenever I go into the woods, I leave like coordinates and where I'm going into the woods too. So if an accident did happen, it's easier to find me. And I also give like a time limit of when I'm going to be out. So like, say for like my wife as my emergency contact, I will give her the coordinates of where I plan to explore. I will say that, you know, by 10:30 in the morning, if you don't get a phone call, then wait till 12 p.m. and you can call the police or whatever, type and start searching for me, because I plan to, you know, break down camp and get out of there by X amount of time. So that gives them a jump start on like rescuing me if something did go wrong out here. So some of those things are ways to eliminate your risk, and that's not just wild animals, that's just like doing this sort of stuff in general, this adventuring type of thing, is that tell people what you're doing and what your plan is and things like that. Now, for actual wild animal safety, I would always suggest that, especially in British Columbia, I would like really recommend that you carry bear spray on you. That will give you the most peace of mind out of anything to bring with you, that if you did encounter a bear and it did attack you, that bear spray is the best thing to have on you for self-defense. It's better than having a rifle even, because you don't have to be accurate with it, and you can just spray it all over the place. And in Canada, we can't carry around automatic like AR-15s or whatever they are that you guys have in the States. So, you know, a hunting rifle, you might not have the chance to shoot a bear or a cougar if they attack you, whereas a spray it's easier to use, and you don't have to be accurate with it, and most likely they get a whiff of that, they'll take off. And it's been proven to be the most effective thing against wild animals as far as defense goes. So that definitely, bear spray is probably your best bet if you want to feel secure in the woods. I've definitely gone on overnights without bear spray before a couple times, and the times that I do bring bear spray, I bring it with me every time now, and it's just helps me sleep at night, and it also helps my wife sleep at night knowing that I have bear spray on me, not just like trying to rough it with a knife type of thing. So it's a really good idea to have bear spray on you. It's kind of like wearing your seatbelt out here. If an accident, you know, when you're driving, you don't get into accidents every day, right? But if you did get into an accident and you weren't wearing your seatbelt that one time, you know, you could have serious injuries. Whereas if you just had your seatbelt on, it could save your life. So that's what bear spray is. It's kind of like your seatbelt out here, and it will, you know, if a cougar decides to jump on your back, you know, maybe you can grab that spray. Whereas like you got your hunting rifle, it's hard to use sometimes. So that's why I would suggest carrying bear spray. You can carry things like cap guns to make noise for wild animals. An animal, if you do have a black bear or a cougar in your area, they're going to know that you're there regardless of how stealthy or what you want to do. So, you know, make noise, be loud. No, you don't want to sneak up on an animal. That's not good. That's why they have bear bells and things like that. I personally don't like bear bells, but I sometimes carry a cap gun on me so I can make some bangs if I want to. I found that very effective in scaring away bears and sea shelt that came around the property for the fruit trees and garbage and things like that. We always had this black bear coming along at nighttime, and you know, I would like shine flashlights in his eyes and he would run away. I would shoot cap guns off, he would run away. Things like that. Bears, they don't really want conflict unless they have to, or they feel like they really are hungry. So most of the time, if you do encounter a bear, like, they're not going to care about you. They're either going to go away from you, they might sniff you, they might like check you out, but they're most likely just going to take off, because humans are, we got guns and things and they know that. So they don't really want to encounter a human if they don't have to, you know. Those are some of the ways that, you know, if I do encounter a bear, I can scare them away without having a conflict in a sense, right? So, you know, blowing a whistle, that would work too. So you don't have to be quiet out here, talking to yourself, singing songs, whatever. You know, let the forest know that you're here, and I guarantee you that you won't see any animals. So they don't want to be around humans. Half the time I'm out here, I don't see, more than half the time, I don't see anything. I might see I mostly see squirrels and birds. I will see deer very rarely, but sometimes I will see deer off in the distance. It's hard to see them. Haven't encountered a black bear since filming this YouTube channel on any of my overnights, nor have I encountered a cougar. I've encountered them in other scenarios, just not filming YouTube. Otherwise, you guys would have shots of it. I've come across a bear cub stuck in a tree one time with my wife. That's a totally different story, but we ended up rescuing it through the whatever they're called, the people that you call the animal police. I forget the name of them. Yeah, you don't encounter these animals very often, and most of the times when you do encounter the animals, you're closer to civilization, and you know, there's a higher density of bears and stuff closer to the city line, in a sense, you know, than there is like where I am right now, in the middle of nowhere on the side of a mountain, in a sense. So those are some things to consider, that, you know, when you're camping alone, you have to try to mentally take all of this in, cover your bases. So like bear spray, cap guns, things like that. Make sure that you pack away, hang your food in a tree at nighttime. Anything that can smell like food, like things like toothpaste, things, you know, all of your food, granola bars, wrappers, the pots that you cook in, anything that can potentially have like a food scent on it should be going up in your bear bag and being hung in a tree at nighttime. Don't give any reason for a bear to come along at nighttime and, you know, sniff your camp out because you left a steak in your bag, or you got a granola bar or a chocolate bar in your pocket and you're sleeping with that in your, you know, you're just inviting an accident to happen. So that's what I always do for when I go to bed at nighttime. I pack everything that smells like food, my food, you know, if I bring toothpaste, things like that, deodorant, whatever has a scent that could potentially be like food, that all goes up in a tree at nighttime. So I don't have to worry about smelling like food necessarily. You could also, you know, cook away from where your camp is. I tend not to do that just because I feel like it doesn't really matter. The bear knows where I am, you know, camping. It's kind of like when you go to a campsite, your fire and your cooking's right there and your tent is right beside it. As long as your food is packed away at nighttime and away from it, it doesn't really matter if you cook on the fire necessarily right there. You know, it might be a little safer to make a cooking site, but I haven't found that necessary to do that. In the reality of it, the fear of camping alone is it's just psychological, and the risk isn't as great as most people perceive it. A lot of people think that I'm crazy for some of the things that I do, as far as, you know, even doing what I'm doing today. Like, I'm in the middle of the woods by myself. I've hiked in, exploring this area of looking for areas to make camps and do overnights, and I'm just, have a day to myself, and it's raining, but I like exploring, so I'm out here completely by myself with no cell phone service. I have some gear with me, but I don't have, a whole ton of stuff. But I won't lie that there are times out here where I do get, nervous. I do get scared. I have been scared at nighttime. I know what that feels like when you're kind of sleeping by the fire and you're like, what if a bear is like coming up behind my tarp, and like you start thinking about it. And a lot of the time you just really have to mentally like work on not thinking like that. Think in the moment, like what is actually happening. If there isn't an animal around, there's no reason to be worrying about an animal being around. If you start hearing things or hearing grunts and huffs, then there's probably an animal around. But until then, like there's no reason to start, envisioning a bear sneaking up on you or a cougar behind every tree. Unless that situation is actually happening, it's not reality. So try to keep yourself in the moment, what is actually around you. Like keep your head up, scan your area. I don't see anything around me, I haven't seen any animals today. Take that into mind. If you're coming along bear scat, fresh bear poop, you find like fresh mud prints in sand or in mud, and you see this bear prints, then start, okay, there's probably a bear around here. I'll start making some noise so I don't sneak up on it and it has no reason to attack me unless it's, feels threatened by me. Maybe I'll unclip my bear spray, just hold it in my hand for a bit and hike around like that. So if a bear does jump out at me, I just can spray it in the face. Things like that. I sleep with bear spray, my knife and my axe beside me. If something did happen, I have things available to reach for that I could use quickly at night. You can use your flashlight to shine it in the eyes of an animal. They don't like that. It's like, when a cop has come up to you and like shines his flashlight in your eyes, it blinds you and it scares animals. It has the same effect on animals. That's something that you can do too. If you have a powerful headlamp, you could sleep with that. So if you did have to, you could turn that on, right in their eyes, and then it's all self-defense after that. But it's very, very, very rare to be attacked by an animal for the amount of encounters that actually happen. People encounter bears and stuff like that quite often, and attacks don't happen very often. So it's about keeping your head up and taking precautions. The people that end up getting into trouble is they get scared, they run away from bears. Don't run away from a wild animal. So they don't have like bear spray on them, they don't have like a whistle on them. They get scared, they run, they do things that you just shouldn't do within a wild animal situation. So those are the people that end up dying and getting killed by wild animals, is that they're not prepared to encounter a wild animal. And when they do encounter one, they get scared and they run. And that's the worst thing that you can do. So if you do encounter an animal, make sure that you're prepared. Like if you're going to go in the woods, just bring a few things. Bring bear spray at least. You encounter a bear, you stand your ground with your bear spray. If he charges you, he's going to get a whole bunch of bear spray in his face. He won't be able to attack you, I guarantee you. If you hit him in the face with a cloud of bear spray, if you've ever shot bear spray before, that's nasty stuff. There's no way they're going to attack you if you get a cloud of that in their face. So those are some things that at least, minimize your risk, and you'll feel a lot more comfortable, I guarantee you. If you got bear spray on your hip, you'll feel way better, especially with the high numbers that we have in BC. There's a very high number of cougars on Vancouver Island. They say that it's the most dense population in the world. Very high number of black bears on Vancouver Island. And this also goes for the lower mainland too. There's very high populations of black bear. Even grizzly bears, if you're like camping in Squamish, there's grizzly bears. So that's a whole nother deal. You really want to have bear spray if you're in grizzly country. I don't want to like fight 1,000-pound grizzly bear or something like that. There's no chance of winning. Maybe a black bear, you could fight them off with a knife. Potentially, people have done it in the past. It's just very, like, that would be terrible. I would way rather have bear spray and be smart about what I'm doing in the woods. So in the end, to get over your fear of camping in the woods and that fear of being alone, you really, do baby steps first. You don't just jump into it. Just, don't throw yourself 5 hours away from your truck or your logging road and camp in the middle of the wilderness and just think that you're going to be totally fine. You camp right beside your truck a few times before you even think about doing an overnight in the middle of the woods. When you want to do an overnight in the middle of the woods, maybe hike in 20 minutes, half an hour, like 10 minutes. You can be in a really nice patch of forest 10 minutes away from your vehicle, and you will feel like you're completely in wilderness. So if you drive up some logging roads, park your truck, walk in 10 minutes, and then if something does happen, you just hike out 10 minutes. Maybe find a place that has self-service, so if you're scared, you can call someone at nighttime. If you don't have self-service, tell people where you are. All those steps really help to make you feel safer out here. And in the end, it is down to, random luck or unluckiness. If you did encounter a bear and they wanted to attack you, you could do all of these preventative steps and still have an encounter. So that's something that if you want to bushcraft and you're in Canada, that's a risk. That's, it's like getting in a vehicle. There's a risk of an accident, and people take that every day and think nothing of it, but you really are more likely to be in a car accident than getting attacked by a bear out here. So just try to tell yourself those things. I know that doesn't help when it's pitch black and you're in your little tarp that, is like paper thin. But that's kind of what you have to work around if you want to be, doing the things that I'm doing or whatever you want to do with the bushcraft stuff. Otherwise, you might just have to just do some day trips or just camp with people so you don't feel that scaredness. Camping with people definitely takes the edge off of those situations, but that still doesn't prevent a wild animal from attacking both of you. So take that into consideration too. Anyways, I hope that this BushTalk episode was interesting for you guys. I know that when I first started doing these things that I definitely had fear about wild animals, and I really tried to work on it, and it's a mental game. It really is a mental game. It's not something that most of us will encounter. The reality is the probability of that situation happening is very, very little. So that's all you have to really work on, is to try to process like that. Anyways, I really hope that you enjoyed this episode. This is Dave from BC Bushcraft. Please like, subscribe, and do all those awesome things, and I'll see you on the next video.